Joining us live now for some local reaction, National Senator Matt Canavan. Matt, it's good to see you this morning. So what are your thoughts on developments overseas this morning?
Well, look, these are very positive developments for Australia in particular. While we're not directly involved in this conflict, the longer it does go on, the more it does distract our most important ally, the United States, the more it takes the United States' military hardware away from our region, and therefore the risks in our region increase. So we obviously have a very clear interest in seeing this conflict subdue sooner rather than later. The objective has been hopefully clear from the United States. I think the most important thing in any conflict, any war that you get involved in, is to have a very clear objective and then a very clear exit of how to get out of that conflict. And if we can be believed here, it's very hard in the fog of war to understand exactly what's going on, but
Sure.
It would appear that the objective has been centrally to destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities. If that's been achieved, hopefully an exit, an off-ramp, as you say, can be taken here and we can get out of this.
Just on the heat that the Prime Minister was getting yesterday, and yes, it was a slow response from the government, but we are, it seems, an afterthought in this conflict. Is it much of a surprise in your view that the Americans didn't reach out to us beforehand, that this strike was going to happen?
Oh, look, not particularly. As I said earlier, it's not something we're directly involved in. We're almost on the other side of the world here. So, look, thankfully, we don't have to deal with these terrible conflicts. Now, that doesn't, in my view, though, excuse the Prime Minister for being so late here with his support for our most important ally. He hasn't fully explained why it took so long for the government to even then somewhat reluctantly back these strikes. As I said, we have no interest in seeing a protracted conflict in the Middle East, but it shouldn't have been hard for the Prime Minister to make clear that Australia also shares the United States' view, which has been a long-held view of their government and our government, that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And so actions that seek to take that option off the table should be supported by the Australian government. It should have been a reflex action, not taken a day of criticism to force the Prime Minister out.
It seems as though that were just caught on the back foot and just didn't know what to do until.
Well, how? I mean, it's been pretty well flagged. I'm sure I hope the Prime Minister's reading the newspaper.
Yeah, I get all that. It just seems, from a layman's point of view, that they just clearly didn't know what was going on. The Americans didn't tell us what was going on, and yeah, it took them so long.
As I say, look, I'm not going to look. Who knows? I don't know, and I'm not sure I want our government to reveal all of those discussions. As I say, this is not our conflict. I'm not making that claim, but it is concerning that the Prime Minister doesn't always seem to have to be brought reluctantly to defend America. I mean, the Prime Minister was quicker out there defending the actions of the Chinese Navy conducting live fire exercises under a civilian flight path between Australia and New Zealand that he was in support of our greatest ally.
That's true.
Something is wrong there.
That's true. Now, as Cam reported a little earlier, Matt, Donald Trump apparently seeking meetings with Indo-Pacific leaders now at this week's NATO summit. So maybe Miles might be the one to jag a one-on-one with Trump. So how would that be for you?
Well, I don't know. It doesn't really affect me much, but I'm sure it'd be very embarrassing for the Prime Minister if that were the case. This is a big problem now that our Prime Minister hasn't met with President Trump 6 months after his election. There has been ample time to do that, and I don't blame the Prime Minister for the events of the G7 meeting. They were out of his control. But what has been in his control is getting to Washington DC before this. Many other leaders have done this. We're one of the Five Eyes nations, so one of the four most important allies to the United States. It is unacceptable that our government, our Prime Minister, has not met with the new Prime Minister 6 months after his election.
Is there anything that you would hope that Miles gets out of him if this were to happen?
Look, I don't. I hope for the best and always for Australia. And I certainly support the Australian government in its endeavours overseas in relations with other countries, but I really think the way President Trump operates, the only way our interests can be furthered is if he can meet, and does meet, with our Prime Minister. I'm not sure anybody below that will make much difference.
Just a final one here. I'm not sure there's a quick response to it, Matt, but if Iran does close the Strait of Hormuz, it would cause a spike in oil prices. And does that not again point to our lack of it here and our lack of refineries here?
Absolutely, Peter. That's an excellent point. Keep in mind, over the past 20 years, the United States has pursued a program of oil independence, and that's been done so under all administrations. In fact, the US achieved the highest rate of oil production for any country in the world ever under Joe Biden. And that has somewhat protected the United States from these disruptions. As has been pointed out, the US now only gets 5% of its oil from that region or through the Straits of Hormuz. That's very different for ourselves, which relies heavily on Singapore for our oil refined products, which a lot of which come from the Middle East. We do actually have a huge amount of oil resources here in Australia. We're just not incentivising anybody to look for them. And that puts us in that vulnerable position.
Good to see you, Matt Canavan, as always. We'll chat to you again soon.